Princess Valeth, Sir Khan, stood before the viewport of her private cruiser, watching the stars blur past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin like polished black stone and eyes that glowed a soft violet. Her people, the Telvari, were among the most powerful species in the known galaxy. They had built empires when most other races were still crawling out of caves. And now, somehow, she had been assigned a human as part of her security detail. The thought made her jaw tighten with irritation. She turned away from the viewport and looked at the man standing quietly in the corner of the room. He was unremarkable in every way. Average height, brown hair cut short, brown eyes that seemed to look at nothing and everything at the same time. He wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations, no medals, no signs of rank beyond a small Earth flag on his shoulder. His name was Connor Hayes. He was 32 years old, according to his file. He had been assigned to her by the Galactic Council as a gesture of alliance between the Telvari Empire and the newly spacefaring humans of Earth. Valeth considered it an insult. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. They were babies in the cosmic sense. Soft, fragile, short-lived. Creatures who died of old age before they reached 100 years. The Telvari lived for 5 centuries. They had reflexes 3 times faster than most species. They had conquered dozens of worlds. What could this human possibly do to protect her? She activated her personal communicator and called her father. Emperor Kale Sir Khan appeared as a hologram in the center of the room, his massive form shimmering with blue light. Father Valeth said, not bothering to hide her frustration. I must protest this arrangement. I have 4 elite Telvari guards. This human is an embarrassment. He cannot even meet my eyes when I speak to him. The Emperor sighed. His face was tired. The rebellion in the outer systems was draining him. The Council insisted on this, daughter. Earth is seeking allies, and we need their vote in the upcoming trade negotiations. Consider it a diplomatic favor. He is useless. Apps. But he is also harmless. Ignore him if you wish. Just complete the negotiations on Crestfall Station and return home safely. The hologram flickered and died. Valeth turned back to Connor Hayes. He had not moved during the entire conversation. Had not reacted at all to being called useless and embarrassing. She walked toward him. Her footsteps silent on the metal floor. He was a full foot shorter than her. She had to look down to meet his eyes. Do you have nothing to say? She demanded. Connor looked up at her. His expression was calm, almost empty. I am here to keep you alive, Your Highness. Nothing more. And how do you plan to do that? You have no visible weapons. No cybernetic enhancements. You are smaller and weaker than every member of my current security team, yes, Your Highness? She waited for him to say more. He did not. You are dismissed, she said finally, waving her hand. Stay out of my way. Connor nodded once and stepped back into the corner. Within moments, Valeth had almost forgotten he was there. The journey to Crestfall Station took 3 standard days. During that time, Valeth observed her human escort with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. He seemed to have no personality at all. He ate his meals alone in a small corner of the crew mess. Always the same thing. A gray paste that humans apparently called oatmeal. He spoke to no one unless spoken to first. He slept for exactly 6 hours each night and spent the rest of his time standing quietly in whatever room Valeth happened to be in. Her Telvari guards found him amusing. They called him the pet in their native language, laughing openly at his expense. They would bump into him in the corridors, force him to move out of their way, make comments about his small size and soft skin. Connor never reacted. Never showed anger or embarrassment or anything at all. On the second day, the largest of her guards, a warrior named Torvik, decided to test the human. He walked up to Connor during the evening meal and knocked the bowl of oatmeal out of his hands. Psst, Torvik said, grinning down at the human. Clumsy little creature, the other guards laughed. Connor looked at the spilled food on the floor. Then he looked up at Torvik. For just a moment, something flickered in his brown eyes. Something that made Torvik's grin falter slightly. Then it was gone. and Connor simply bent down, cleaned up the mess, and walked away to get another bowl. Valeth watched this exchange from across the room. She felt a strange sensation she could not identify. Not sympathy exactly. More like ... confusion. That night, she found herself unable to sleep. She walked the corridors of her ship, lost in thought about the negotiations ahead. When she passed the observation deck, she found Connor standing alone, looking out at the stars. She almost walked past him, but something made her stop. "Do you not find their treatment offensive?" she asked. Connor did not turn around. "Whose treatment, Your Highness?" "My guards. They mock you constantly. They call you names. They treat you like an animal, I have noticed. And you do nothing?" He finally turned to look at her. In the dim light of the observation deck, his face seemed older somehow, more worn. "I have been called worse by better, Your Highness," he said quietly. Valeth did not know how to respond to that. She stood there for a moment, watching him watch the stars. Then she turned and walked away, more confused than before. Crestfall Station appeared on their sensors the next morning. It was a massive ring structure, nearly 50 kilometers in diameter, orbiting a dead star. The station was neutral territory, belonging to no empire or species. It was a place for diplomacy, for trade, for the kind of conversations that could not happen anywhere else. It was also, Valeth knew, a place where criminals and assassins walked freely among diplomats and merchants. As her ship docked with the station, she felt a small knot of tension form in her stomach. The negotiations ahead would be difficult. The Rithani Collective wanted mining rights in Telvari space. Her father wanted them to stop harboring the pirates who raided their border colonies. Neither side was willing to give ground. She stepped off the ship with her head held high, her 4 Telvari guards forming a protective diamond around her. Connor Hayes walked 3 paces behind, silent and unnoticed, just as she preferred. But as she walked through the crowded docking bay, surrounded by aliens of 100 different species, she could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. That somewhere in this crowd, hidden among the merchants and diplomats, something dangerous was waiting. She pushed the feeling aside. She was a princess of the Telvari Empire. She had nothing to fear. She was wrong. The diplomatic hall of Crestfall Station was designed to impress. The ceiling rose nearly 100 feet overhead, covered with glowing crystals that mimicked the light of a dozen different suns. The floor was polished marble, imported from a world that no longer existed. Hundreds of diplomats, merchants, and observers filled the space, their voices creating a constant hum of conversation in a dozen languages. Valeth moved through the crowd with practiced grace. She smiled at the right people, nodded to the right ambassadors, ignored the ones who did not matter. This was a game she had been playing since childhood. She was very good at it. The Rithani delegation waited for her near the center of the hall. They were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their leader, Ambassador Kreth, greeted her with a bow that was slightly too shallow to be respectful. "Princess Valeth," he said, his voice like dry leaves scraping against stone. "How kind of you to grace us with your presence, Ambassador Kreth." She returned his bow with one equally shallow. "Shall we begin?" The negotiations were exactly as tedious as she had expected. The Rithani wanted access to the mineral-rich moons of the Telvari border systems. In exchange, they offered trade agreements and promises of cooperation that meant nothing. They refused to discuss the pirate fleets that operated from their territory, claiming they had no control over independent vessels. Valeth argued, threatened, bargained. It was exhausting work. But she was making progress. By the end of the first day, she had extracted a promise that the Rithani would at least investigate the pirate attacks. It was not much. It was something. She returned to her quarters tired but satisfied. Connor Hayes stood in the corner of her room, exactly where she had left him that morning. "Did you eat?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "Yes, Your Highness." "Did my guards give you trouble?" "No more than usual, Your Highness." She nodded and dismissed him for the night. The second day of negotiations began badly. The Rithani had received new instructions overnight. They were now demanding full mining rights to 3 systems instead of 1, with no promise of action against the pirates in return. Ambassador Kreth smiled his thin smile and pretended. This was a reasonable request. Valeth kept her temper. Barely. She was in the middle of explaining, for the 4th time, why the Telvar could not simply give away their territory. When she felt someone move close behind her, Connor Hayes leaned in, his lips near her ear. "Your Highness, you need to return to your quarters." She stiffened at his closeness. The audacity of it. A human touching distance from a Telvari princess, speaking to her as if he had the right. "Step back," she said through clenched teeth. "Oh. Your Highness." Torvik appeared at her side, his hand on his weapon. "You do not give orders to the princess, human. Know your place." Connor did not look at him. His eyes were fixed on something across the crowded hall. His face was still calm, but there was something different about him now. Something focused. 3 Vorn assassins entered through the maintenance corridor 6 minutes ago, he said quietly. 2 more are positioned near the eastern exit. I have counted at least 3 others blending with the catering staff. There are probably more I have not identified yet. Valeth felt her blood run cold. The Vorn were legendary. Shapeshifters who could mimic any species perfectly. They were the most expensive assassins in the galaxy, hired only by governments or the very wealthy. If someone had sent 10 Vorn after her, this was not a random attack. This was an execution. "How do you know this?" she demanded. Connor finally looked at her. His brown eyes were hard. "The server by the fountain has been holding the same drink for 40 minutes without taking a sip. The 2 figures near the exit have not blinked once since I started watching them. The waiter near the Rathani delegation has blood on his sleeve." "Still wet?" Torvik snorted. "You are seeing threats that do not exist, human. This is a secure, diplomatic zone. The blood on that waiter's sleeve belongs to whoever he replaced. Probably a staff member found dead in a storage room. Somewhere." Connor's. The voice was flat. "Patient. You have 12 seconds. To get her out of here before I do it." "Myself." Something in his tone made Valeth's heart skip. She looked across the hall at the server Connor had mentioned. He was tall, dressed in the simple white uniform of the station's catering staff. He was holding a tray of drinks and smiling at the guests around him, but his eyes were wrong. They were too still, too focused, and they were looking directly at her. "Oh, Torvik," she said quietly. "Get me out of here." The Telvari guard hesitated for only a moment. Then he nodded and began moving her toward the nearest exit. They made it 8 seconds. The first shot came from somewhere behind them. A beam of white-hot energy that burned a hole through the marble floor, where Valeth had been standing moments before. The hall erupted into chaos. Diplomats screamed and ran in all directions. Tables overturned. Drinks shattered on the floor. More shots rang out as the hidden assassins revealed themselves, their bodies shifting and changing as they dropped their disguises. Valeth saw Vorn in its true form for the first time. It was horrifying. Gray skin stretched tight over too many bones. A face with no features, except a wide mouth full of needle teeth. Arms that bent in the wrong directions. 3 of them were already moving toward her, faster than any natural creature should be able to move. Torvik pushed her behind him and drew his blade. The other Telvari guards formed a protective circle. But even as they did, Valeth saw one of them fall, a curved blade buried in his throat. He was dead before he hit the ground. Then Connor moved. She had seen Telvari warriors fight. She had seen combat recordings from a dozen different species. She thought she knew what battle looked like. She was wrong. Connor did not run so much as flow. One moment he was beside her, the next he was between her and the nearest Vorn. The assassin struck at him with clawed hands. But Connor was no longer there. He had redirected the attack somehow, using the creature's own speed against it. The Vorn crashed into a marble pillar with enough force to crack the stone before it could recover. Connor's hand found its neck. There was a sound like dry branches snapping. The Vorn fell and did not move again. Connor turned to look at her. His face was calm, empty, like he had done nothing more interesting than swat a fly. Move, he said. And Valith, princess of the Telvari Empire, heir to one of the most powerful thrones in the galaxy, found herself obeying without question. They ran. The corridor outside the diplomatic hall was long and dimly lit. Emergency lights flashed red overhead. Alarms blared from hidden speakers. Velith's remaining guards surrounded her, weapons drawn. Moving in tight formation, Connor brought up the rear, walking backward, watching every shadow. How many? Valith asked, her voice tight with fear she refused to show. I counted 10, Connor said. I have dealt with one. Torvik laughed, but there was no humor in it. 9 Vorn against 2 Telvari warriors and a human. We are already dead. Might be, Connor said. She will not be. They reached a junction where 4 corridors met. Connor stopped walking. His head tilted slightly, like a predator, listening for prey. They're cutting us off, he said. 3 from behind. 2 from the left. The others are moving to block the route to her quarters. Torvik gripped his blade tighter. Then we fight. No. Connor pointed to a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. She goes up. You take her. There is an access route to the emergency shuttles. Get her off this station. What about you? Connor pulled something from his uniform. It was a simple metal rod, no longer than his forearm. He pressed something, and it extended with a soft click into a baton about 3 feet long. I will buy you time, he said. Torvik stared at him. For the first time since they had met, there was something other than contempt in his eyes. Against 9 assassins? With that, Connor's expression did not change. I will manage. Valith refused to leave. She stood at the base of the maintenance hatch, looking down at the human who was preparing to die for her. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Every instinct told her to climb, to run, to survive. But something kept her feet planted on the ground. This is foolish, she said. 1 human against 9 Vorn? You will die in seconds. Connor did not look at her. He was adjusting his grip on the metal baton, rolling his shoulders, loosening muscles that were about to be pushed beyond their limits. Your Highness, with respect. You need to go. I am trying to save your life. I am trying to save yours. He finally turned to face her. That is my job. That is why I am here. Now please, for both our sakes, climb. Torvik grabbed her arm. He is right, Princess. We need to move. But Valith could not look away from Connor's eyes. They were brown, simple, unremarkable, she had thought them. Empty before, dull, the eyes of a creature with nothing. Interesting inside. She had been wrong. There was something in those eyes now. Something old and cold and utterly without fear. It was not bravery exactly. It was something deeper. Something that had been built over years of pain and violence and survival. What are you? She whispered. Connor smiled. It was a small thing, barely a movement of his lips. I am tired, Your Highness, old, and very, very irritated. A sound echoed from the corridor behind them. Footsteps. Fast. Getting closer. 12 years, Connor said quietly. I have been doing this for 12 years. Since before your empire New Earth existed, I have fought things you cannot imagine. I have survived things that should have killed me 100 times over. He raised the baton. 9 Vorn is not the worst odds I have ever faced. The first assassin came around the corner before Valith could respond. It moved like liquid shadow, its body shifting and changing as it ran. One moment it looked almost human. The next, it was something from a nightmare. All teeth and claws and hunger, Connor met it head on. The baton whipped out in a blur of motion, catching the Vorn across the throat. The creature choked, stumbled, and Connor was already moving. He spun, driving his elbow into the face of a second assassin that had materialized from the shadows behind him. Valith heard bone. Crack. 2 more Vorn attacked from opposite directions. Their movements perfectly coordinated. Connor ducked under a blade aimed at his neck, caught one attacker's arm, and somehow used it to block the other's strike. Then he twisted, a sharp motion of his entire body, and suddenly the 2 assassins were stabbing each other with their own weapons. They fell together in a tangle. of gray limbs, Torvik pulled at her arm. "Princess, we must go." But she could not move, could not look away. Connor fought like nothing she had ever seen. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, no pause for breath or thought. Each attack flowed into the next, each movement creating an opening for the one that followed. He used the walls, the floor, the bodies of fallen enemies. Everything was a weapon. A fifth Vorn lunged at him from the darkness. Its claws found his side, raking deep gashes across his ribs. Blood sprayed across the metal floor. Connor did not slow down. He caught the creature's wrist, twisted until something snapped and drove its own blade up through its jaw. The Vorn died with a wet gurgling sound. 5 down. For to go, the remaining assassins circled him now. They had seen what he could do. They were being careful. Their bodies flickered between forms, trying to confuse him, trying to find an opening. One of them spoke. Its voice was like gravel being ground to dust. "What are you?" Connor spat blood onto the floor. He was breathing hard now. His gray uniform was dark with blood, some of it his own, most of it not. The baton in his hand was slick and red. "I told you," he said. Tired, old, irritated, he attacked first. The baton shattered one Vorn's knee with a crack like breaking glass. The creature screamed and fell. Connor's free hand found another's throat, crushing, tearing, destroying. 2 more died in seconds. The 8th assassin was faster than the others. It got past his guard, driving a curved blade deep into his shoulder. Connor grunted in pain. Then he grabbed the blade, pulled it from his own flesh, buried it in the assassin's eye. The creature thrashed once and went still. 9. The last Vorn looked at the bodies of its companions, looked at the humans standing among them, covered in blood that was not his own. Still holding that simple metal baton, it ran. Connor pulled something from his boot, a small throwing blade no larger than his finger. He sent it spinning down the corridor with a flick of his wrist. The Vorn made it 3 steps before the blade found the back of its skull. 10. The corridor fell, silent except for the wail of distant alarms. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, some still twitching, most completely still. The walls were painted with blood. The air smelled like copper and death. Connor stood in the center of it all, swaying slightly on his feet. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed. Valeth moved before she knew what she was doing. She pushed past Torvik, past her remaining guard, and dropped to her knees beside the fallen human. Her hands pressed against the wound in his side, trying to stop the blood that poured between her fingers. "Medical team," she shouted. Now, Torvik was already speaking into his communicator, calling for help, but Valeth barely heard him. She was looking at Connor's face. His eyes were still open, still alert, still watching the corridor for threats, even as his life leaked out onto the floor. "That was 10, he said. His voice was weak, but steady. "I counted 10. Stop talking. Save your strength. You should not be here, Your Highness. It is not safe." She laughed despite herself. A bitter, disbelieving sound. "You just killed 10 Vorn assassins. I think we are safe for the moment. There might be more, or not. You do not know that." She looked down at him, this strange, quiet, impossible human. His blood was warm on her hands. His face was pale. He should have been dead already. By any medical standard, by any law of biology she knew, he should have been dead, but his eyes were still open. "Still watching?" "Why?" she asked. "Why did you do this?" Connor blinked slowly. "It is my job. No one would have blamed you for running. No one expected you to fight. You could have escaped with us and left you unprotected. What if they had caught up?" He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "You are the mission, Your Highness. You are what matters. Everything else is secondary." Medical teams arrived then, rushing into the corridor, with stretchers and equipment. They pushed Valeth aside and surrounded Connor. Shouting orders and readings that meant nothing to her, she stood in the corridor, covered in human blood, watching them work. Torvik appeared at her side. He was staring at the bodies scattered across the floor. His face was pale. "Princess," he said quietly, "what just happened?" Valeth did not answer. She was not sure she could. The medical bay of Crestfall Station was white and cold and smelled like chemicals Valeth could not name. She sat in a chair beside Connor's bed, watching the machines that beeped and hummed around him. Tubes ran into his arms, carrying blood and medicine and other things she did not understand. His chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm. He had been unconscious for 2 days. The doctors said it was a miracle he was alive at all. 17 separate wounds. For that should have been fatal. Blood loss that would have killed any other species 3 times over. His body was broken in 100 different ways, and yet his heart kept beating. His lungs kept breathing. His cells kept repairing themselves with a speed that made the alien physicians shake their heads in amazement. Humans, it seemed, were harder to kill than anyone had realized. Valeth had not left his bedside since they brought him in. She had meetings to attend, negotiations to complete, a father to reassure. She ignored all of it. Let her advisors handle the details. Let the council wonder where she was. She was exactly where she needed to be. The door opened behind her. She did not turn around, Princess. It was Torvik's voice. "The Rathani ambassador wishes to speak with you. Tell him I am busy," he insists. Then tell him I do not care about his insistence. There was a pause. Then Torvik stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He walked to the other side of the bed and looked down at the unconscious human. "The doctors say he will live," he said quietly. "I know. They say he should not. They say everything they know about biology tells them he should be dead. But he refuses to die." Valeth said nothing. Torvik was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, his voice strange. "I owe him an apology." She looked up at that. "What?" "I mocked him, belittled him, treated him as less than nothing." Torvik's jaw tightened. "And then he killed 10 Vorn to protect you, while I stood there and watched. You were protecting me as well. I did nothing. I watched a human do what I could not. What I was too slow to do." He looked at her and there was shame in his eyes. "He warned us. He knew they were there before anyone else. And I called it paranoid nonsense." Valeth remembered that moment. Remembered the contempt in Torvik's voice. The certainty that the human was seeing threats that did not exist. You could not have known. But he knew. He saw what none of us could see. And when the attack came, he did not hesitate. He did not run. Torvik shook his head slowly. "I have been a warrior for 60 years. I have fought in 3 wars. I have killed enemies of our empire by the dozen, and I have never seen anyone fight like that." Valeth looked back at Connor's face. Even in sleep, there was something hard about it, something worn. The face of someone who had seen too much and kept going anyway. "What do you know about humans?" she asked. "Very little. They are a young species. They only achieved space travel recently. They are fragile compared to most other races." That is what I thought too. She reached out and touched Connor's hand. It was warm despite the pallor of his skin. I thought he was useless. Worthless. A diplomatic joke sent to embarrass me. So did I. I was wrong. Torvik nodded slowly. So was I. They sat in silence for a long time after that. The machines beeped. The lights hummed. Somewhere in the distance, the station continued its endless rotation around the dead star. On the morning of the 3rd day, Connor opened his eyes. Valeth was asleep in her chair, her head resting on her arms at the edge of his bed. She woke to the sound of movement and found him looking at her with those unremarkable brown eyes.
"Your Highness,"
he said. His voice was rough, dry from days of silence. "You should not be here." She sat up, her heart's racing. "You are awake. Unfortunately." He tried to sit up and immediately winced in pain. "How long was I out?" 2 days. Almost 3. He processed this information with a slight nod. "The assassins. All dead. You killed all 10 of them. Good." He relaxed slightly, settling back against the pillows. "And you were unharmed?" "Yes, thanks to you. Then I did my job." He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "You should return to your duties, Your Highness. The negotiations must be important if someone paid for 10 Vorn to stop them." Valeth stared at him. "You nearly died. You killed 10 legendary assassins with nothing but a metal stick in your bare hands. And your first thought upon waking is about my negotiations? It is my job to think about your safety. Your negotiations affect your safety. Therefore, I think about your negotiations." That is the most ridiculous logic I have ever heard. Human logic. Something almost like a smile crossed his face. "We are known for it." She laughed. It surprised her, the sound of it. She had not laughed in days, maybe weeks. "The surgeons say you should be dead," she told him. "They say they have never seen anyone survive wounds like yours. They say humans are not supposed to be this durable." Connor was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Humans have a long history of surviving things we are not supposed to survive. Ice ages, plagues, wars that killed millions, predators that should have eaten us, disasters that should have wiped us out." He looked at her, and there was something ancient in his eyes, something that went back farther than 40 years of space travel. "We are not strong because we are impressive, Your Highness. We are not fast or powerful or particularly intelligent compared to other species. But we endure. We adapt. We refuse to die when dying would be easier. Why? Because giving up is not in our nature. Because we are stubborn and foolish and too angry to quit." He coughed, and she saw pain flicker across his face. "And because sometimes there is something worth dying for." Valeth thought about his words, about the way he had fought in that corridor. No fear, no hesitation. Just a simple determination to keep her alive, no matter the cost. "I misjudged you," she said quietly. "I thought you were nothing, useless, worthless. Most species do. I was wrong." "Yes," he met her eyes. "You were." There was no accusation in his voice, no bitterness. Just a simple statement of fact. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I heal. Then I return to duty." He paused. "Unless you wish to request a different escort." "I would understand." Aleth stood up. She was tall, even for a Telvari, and in that moment she used every inch of her height. "I am going to pretend you did not say that," she said. "You saved my life. You killed 10 assassins who should have killed us both. You did all of this without complaint, without recognition, without any expectation of thanks. It is my job. It is more than that." She looked down at him, and for the first time, she saw him clearly, not as a pet, not as a diplomatic gesture, not as a useless human, but as a warrior, a protector, someone worthy of respect. "When you recover," she said, "I want you to remain as my permanent escort. Not because the council demands it, not as a diplomatic favor, because I am asking you. Personally." Connor was silent for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, something that might have been surprise. "Why?" he asked. "Because I need someone I can trust. Someone who will protect me, not because they are ordered to, but because they choose to. Someone who sees threats before anyone else. Someone who will fight for me when everyone else runs." She paused. "Because I need you, Connor Hayes. Not a human. Not an escort. You." The silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Connor nodded. "As you wish, Your Highness." Valeth smiled. It was the first real smile she had felt in a very long time. 3 months had passed since the attack on Crestfall Station. The shuttle descended through the clouds of the Telvari homeworld, carrying Princess Valeth Serkan back to the palace she had left nearly half a year ago. Through the viewport, she watched the familiar landscape emerge below, mountains of black crystal, forests of silver trees, cities that glittered like fallen stars across the purple plains home. She had completed the negotiations despite the chaos. The Rathani had been horrified by the attack, terrified that they would be blamed for hiring the assassins. They had agreed to almost everything she asked for, including full cooperation against the pirate fleets. Her father had called it the greatest diplomatic victory of his reign. Valeth did not feel victorious. She felt changed. The shuttle landed on the private platform of the Imperial Palace. Servants rushed forward to greet her, to take her bags, to escort her to her chambers. She ignored them all and turned to the man who descended the ramp behind her. Connor Hayes looked almost normal again. 3 months of recovery had healed his wounds, leaving only faint scars where the Vorn blades had cut him. He wore the same simple gray uniform, the same unremarkable expression, the same quiet watchfulness that she had once mistaken for emptiness. She knew better now. "Welcome to my home," she said. Connor looked around at the towering spires, the gardens of crystal flowers, the sky that burned with the light of 3 suns. "It is impressive, Your Highness. Is it?" "Yes." He paused. "Though I suspect I will get lost frequently." She smiled. "I will have someone draw you a map." They walked together into the palace, passing through halls of polished stone and vaulted ceilings. Servants stared. Guards whispered. Everyone noticed the small human walking beside the princess, matching her stride, watching every shadow with those calm brown eyes. The court was gathered in the great hall to welcome her home. Hundreds of Telvari nobles, dressed in their finest, arranged according to rank and importance. They fell silent as she entered, then bowed in perfect unison. Her father sat on the throne at the far end of the hall. Emperor Kale Sir Khan was old, even by Telvari standards, but his eyes were still sharp and his voice still carried the weight of absolute authority. "Daughter," he said as she approached, "welcome home. You have done well." Valeth bowed. "Thank you, father." "And this," the emperor continued, his gaze shifting to Connor, "is the human who killed 10 Vorn assassins." The hall fell completely silent. Every eye turned to the small, unremarkable man standing 3 paces behind the princess. Connor bowed, deeper than protocol required. "Your Majesty?" The emperor studied him for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. "I have watched the security recordings from Crestfall Station. I have seen what you did in that corridor. I have consulted with my physicians about your injuries and your recovery. Yes, Your Majesty. They tell me that what you accomplished should be impossible. They tell me that by every measure they know, you should be dead 10 times over. They tell me that humans are a fragile species, unfit for combat, unsuited for the dangers of the galaxy." Connor said nothing. The emperor rose from his throne. He was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, his black skin gleaming in the light of 1,000 crystals. He descended the steps and walked toward the human until they stood face to face. "They are wrong," the emperor said. "All of them. I have led armies for 300 years. I have seen warriors from 100 different species, and I have never, in all my centuries, seen anyone fight the way you did." He reached out and placed a massive hand on Connor's shoulder. The gesture was strange, intimate, completely unlike anything the court had ever seen their emperor do. "You saved my daughter's life. You faced death without hesitation and emerged victorious. For this, you have the eternal gratitude of the Telvari Empire and its throne." Connor met the emperor's eyes. "I was only doing my job, Your Majesty." "No, you were doing far more than that, and I suspect you know it." Something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of something that words could not capture. The emperor turned to address the court. "Let it be known throughout the empire that Connor Hayes of Earth is to be treated with the same respect accorded to any member of my personal guard. He has earned this honor through actions, not words. Through blood, not politics." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some faces showed confusion. Others showed resentment. But more than a few showed something else. Curiosity. Respect, maybe. Even fear. The ceremony continued with all the proper rituals and formalities. Valeth stood at her father's side, accepting the congratulations of nobles she barely knew, playing the role of the dutiful princess returning in triumph. But part of her mind was elsewhere. Part of her was thinking about the journey ahead. Later that night, she found Connor on one of the palace balconies, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. "You should be resting," she said. "I have rested enough." He did not turn around. Your father is an impressive man. He is a complicated man. But yes, impressive as well. He understands. Understands what? Connor was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. What humanity really is. What we are capable of when pushed. Most species look at us and see weakness. Small bodies. Short lives. No natural weapons. No special abilities. He turned to face her. Your father looked at those recordings and saw something else. He saw what happens when you corner a human and threaten what they care about. And what is that? We do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not accept that something is impossible just because everyone says it is. He smiled, a rare expression that transformed his face. We are stubborn, foolish, unreasonable. And sometimes, when everything falls apart, those are exactly the qualities that matter. Valeth moved to stand beside him, looking out at the night sky. 3 moons hung above the horizon, their light painting the gardens in shades of silver and blue. The galaxy does not know about humans yet, she said quietly. Not really. They think they do. They think you are just another young species, stumbling into the stars, easy to ignore or exploit. They do. They are in for a surprise. Connor laughed. It was a soft sound, barely more than a breath, but it was the first time she had heard him laugh in all their months together. Yes, Your Highness, I believe they are. They stood together in comfortable silence, princess and guardian, watching the moons rise over a world that was only beginning to understand what humanity could be. Somewhere out there, beyond the light of Telvari's suns, other species were making the same mistake, underestimating the small, fragile creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable star, dismissing them as worthless, useless. Beneath notice, Valeth thought about all the empires that had made that mistake throughout history, all the enemies who had looked at humans and seen only weakness. Most of them were gone now, destroyed or diminished or simply forgotten. The humans remained. She looked at Connor Hayes, this quiet, ordinary man who had killed 10 of the galaxy's deadliest, assassins with nothing but a metal stick in his bare hands. Perhaps, she thought, there was nothing ordinary about humanity at all. Perhaps. There never had been. And as the moons rose higher and the night grew deep, she found herself grateful that the first human she had truly known was this one. This tired, old, irritated man who had taught her more about strength in 3 months than she had learned in a century of living. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of things that wanted to destroy everything she loved, but Connor Hayes stood beside her, and somehow that was enough.